opening new vistas through a window of truth, connecting Korea and the world. Your pick, Arirang News.
It's April 1st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the U.S. Trade Representative's Trade Barrier Report. According to the USTR report, South Korea has pursued policies that prioritize local technology and products over foreign defense technology through its defense offset program. Questions over South Korea's import ban on American beef and its emission-related regulations on imported cars were raised yet again. U.S. President Donald Trump says that there is a communication with North Korea without specifying what exactly that communication is. He also noted he and the leader Kim Jong-un would do something at some point. Students at all but 2 out of 40 medical schools across the country said Monday they are returning to class before the government set deadline for reinstatement. After boycotting classes over the government's increase in school admissions to address a chronic shortage of doctors. With the Trump administration to announce further tariffs in the coming days, a recent U.S. report on foreign trade barriers is getting more attention. The report states that South Korea's regulations on imported vehicles and pricing of medical products remain as obstacles. Our An Sung-jin starts us off.
The Trump administration is putting scrutiny on South Korea's trade barriers. The United States Trade Representative on Monday local time released a 7-page national trade estimate report, which stated that emissions-related regulations on imported vehicles and the pricing of pharmaceutical products remain a barrier to trade. The U.S. concerns came from a lack of transparency despite South Korea's Clean Air Conservation Act layout, and added that market entry for U.S. automotive manufacturers into South Korea remains a top priority. Korea's prioritization of local technology over foreign technology in defense procurement has also been labeled a barrier. In the case of the pharmaceutical and medical industry, the report said Korea lacks transparency and opportunity for stakeholders to input into proposed policy changes. It also noted Ho's import ban on American beef from cattle aged 30 months or older, calling the restriction a transitional measure. Other trade barriers include digital trade barriers such as network usage fees that allegedly feed into a monopoly of internet service providers. The USTR releases an annual report to the President and Congress that documents obstacles for U.S. exporters and solutions, including efforts to overcome these barriers. Though these trade barriers have already been brought up in the past, with Trump's hardline tariff impositions, they seem more pertinent. Trump's efforts to impose reciprocal tariffs will resume from the beginning of April. He has stated that further details will become clear between the night of April 1st or 2nd Eastern Time. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And the price of gold has soared to a new record high ahead of the announcement of reciprocal tariffs by the Trump administration this week. Spot gold prices peaked at $3,128.06 on Monday, continuing a surge that has seen a gain over 18% since the start of the year. Experts say the rise is due to heightened demand as investors seek safe haven assets amid economic uncertainty and escalating global trade tensions. U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted at further engagement with North Korea, confirming ongoing communication with the leader Kim Jong-un. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Monday, Trump said he has a very good relationship with Kim, despite a rocky start during his first term. He said there is a communication, although he didn't clarify whether this was through direct talks with Kim or via aides. Trump described North Korea as a big nuclear nation and called Kim Jong-un a very smart guy. He also said his administration will likely take some action at some point, but offered no specifics. While the record delay in announcing an impeachment ruling for President Yoon is leading to various speculations, the Constitutional Court is reportedly handling the case with a great deal of caution and prudence. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young tells us more.
The Constitutional Court is working cautiously and thoroughly on President Yoon's impeachment case, as speculation continues over when the justices will deliver their ruling. Appearing before the National Assembly on Monday, the Constitutional Court Secretary-General Kim Jong-un said the 8-member bench is deliberating with caution in their frequent in-depth reviews and discussions. Kim added even he wasn't informed of how many times the justices convened or what stage they were in their deliberations due to the high level of confidentiality. The justices have been deliberating for more than a month after Yoon's final trial hearing in February, the longest period yet for a presidential case. Once each justice concludes their review and expresses their opinion, the bench is expected to draw up their collective decision before announcing the ruling date 2 to 3 days in advance. While some believe the ruling could be as early as this Thursday, if the bench schedules a Friday ruling in line with past presidential impeachments, April 4th and 11th are key dates to watch. But given the record deliberation period, other observers say the verdict could take longer to be issued, as the justices may be sharply split in their opinions on whether or not President Yoon's martial law declaration warrants an impeachment. The court needs at least 6 votes to remove a president. If 3 or more justices are against impeachment, Yoon will be restored to office. At this point, April 18th is broadly considered the deadline for the bench, the date Justices Moon Young-bae and Lee Mi-sun retire. In 2017, the court dismissed President Park Geun-hye on a Friday before Acting Chief Justice Lee Jung-mi stepped down the next Monday. But this time around, the 2 vacancies would leave only 6 justices on the bench, below the 7-member threshold required to deliver a ruling. The opposition Democratic Party has been calling for the urgent appointment of a left-leaning Judge Ma Eun-yeol to secure a 6-vote majority to impeach the president, as an early election would favour their party leader Lee Jae-myung. The DP has also been pushing to amend the Constitutional Court Act to extend the retiring justices' terms. The Court Secretary-General said while the suggestion is under internal review, there is no official position yet. When asked if President Yoon's ruling would be made by the 18th, the Court Secretary-General said the aim is still to issue a verdict as swiftly as possible, but declined to specify a date. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
So the last day of March has passed, meaning the final call will be made in April this month. Let's turn to Professor Lee Hyun for more this morning. Welcome back, Professor Lee.
Well, thanks for having me on the program.
Good morning. There are calls that the Constitutional Court should issue a statement and explain the reasons for such a long delay. Isn't that rare for the court to issue an explanation?
Absolutely. The court is not really in the business of making announcements about, why there's a delay in the ruling because, for several reasons. most specifically, you want to avoid speculation and misinformation. The court is in the business of making decisions, and I know everyone is very curious. Court watchers and as well as pundits, and the media, of course, is very keenly interested in when the court is going to actually release its decision. But the fact that there's been a delay, everyone's speculating as to the reasons why. And so, if the court goes ahead and makes an announcement at this point about and tries to explain the delay, I think that will cause a lot of confusion in terms of what the court is trying to accomplish, which is essentially to make the decision as to whether or not President Yoon should be removed from office. And so it's highly unlikely that the court would come out with a specific explanation as to providing the reasons for why the court has yet at this point delayed its ruling on the decision on Yoon's impeachment.
Well, some of the experts I've talked to, they say Yoon's case is not as complicated as that of former President Park Geun-hye. They've expressed, frustration over the delay. I'd like to hear what's your take on this?
Right. I mean, as you noted, a lot of people have thought maybe this was a slam dunk case. I mean, basically, this should be an 8-0 decision. But as people have sort of gone through and thought through as to, the reasons why there's a delay, that there's speculation, of course, that this case is more complicated, maybe more than it seems on its face, because, when judges come to a decision like this, obviously a very politically highly charged case, but also potentially, certain legal complications may arise. There's been talk, at least among legal scholars, that this case could potentially be dismissed by a certain number of the judges. And obviously, when you think about this case, you think about progressive judges, you may think of conservative judges, think about what those judges are focusing on in terms of their understanding of the case and its implications for not just the legal implications, but obviously also for the political implications. And so, and then I think in this case, the delay is actually indicating that there's more complications here than it meets the eye. And I think that's where we're at right now with this particular decision.
Well, that is why a ruling date is still up in the air. But I have to ask, as a legal expert's point of view, when do you think the court will or maybe must announce a ruling date to prevent any more confusion, instability, and impatience among people?
Yeah, that's a difficult question in some part because, the court can obviously take its time, but, there's that time window, 180 days. And now we're not just talking about that deadline, but we're also talking about the impending retirements of 2 justices on the 18th of April. So if the court is going to make a decision at this point, it's going to have to make it before the 18th when the 2 justices will have to retire because their terms are over. But I mean, a point of fact, if the court is unable to come to some consensus, and my assumption is that there's really furious discussion happening within the court as to the merits as to why President Yoon should be impeached or why he shouldn't. And if the court's desires to achieve consent or at least some unanimity, then this may take longer than we expect. But at some point the court's going to have to make a decision. So the best guess, of course, at this point is that before the 2 justices will have to retire, that's when the court will make its decision. So we can look forward maybe to potentially before the 18th of April.
And the opposition Democratic Party has designated today, April 1st, as the deadline for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo to appoint Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk. And they were warning that it would make a major decision if Han doesn't appoint Ma. Does that mean another impeachment motion, the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo?
Well, certainly it's possible, but it's hard to imagine that he'd be impeached again, given the fact that he was, of course, vindicated by the court. So
Right.
The fact that they would actually try to do this again, I think, had obviously severe political implications. But the legal side of things, the court has already said that while it was unconstitutional for him to not appoint Judge Ma to the bench, that the court was not in a position to force the prime minister, the acting president in this case, to make that appointment. So I think they're basically posturing at this point in terms of threatening impeachment because I don't think it's going to happen. And also, if it goes back, I think the political damage to the Democratic Party would be severe.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here. It looks highly unlikely that Han will appoint Ma. But let's say Han does appoint Ma. Can Ma play an active role in the ruling? And if so, to what extent do you think?
I mean, he wouldn't be able to unless they sort of reintroduced all the evidence and he was present for the hearings. I mean, at this point, his involvement, his appointment would really have no impact on the decision of the impeachment because he was not involved in any of the deliberative processes, but also the investigations itself. So I don't anticipate that he would, if he was on the bench, that he would play a role in the actual decision.
Alrighty, Professor Yi, it was good to have you with us again. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure always.
Medical students who boycotted classes over the government's medical school admissions increase say they will be back in school just right before the government imposed a deadline for reinstatement on Monday. Our Lee-seung has more.
Out of 40 medical schools nationwide, students from 38 of the schools have decided to return to class before the Monday deadline imposed by the government. According to sources familiar with the matter, 38 of the medical schools saw almost all of their students who had been on leave of absence complete their registration to return to school. Among the schools that saw their students register for classes before the deadline were Seoul National University, Yonsei University, Korea University, Sungkyunkwan University, and Busan National University. The two medical schools where students hadn't registered before the deadline were Inje University and Hallym University. The government last month set a March 31st deadline after it announced a conditional decision to set the medical school admissions quota at 3,058 for the 2026 academic year. That is similar to the figure before the current administration decided to increase admissions by 2,000 a year ago. In order to transition into the delayed school semester, most medical schools will begin with a few weeks of online classes. Seoul National University announced last week that online classes will be held for the first 1 to 2 weeks starting Monday. Ulsan University and Korea University have started online classes as well. Yonsei University, which was among the first medical schools to announce a full return of students, will conduct both online and offline classes. Based on data on the number of medical school students returning, the Ministry of Education will finalize the enrollment quota for next year's admissions by the end of the month. While the government expects the medical admissions quota to return to 3,058, it warned that the quota could return to 5,058 if students take a leave of absence or boycott classes after returning. Lee-seung, Arirang News.
With the main blaze of the deadly wildfires contained here in South Korea, South Korean authorities are now looking into what caused the crisis. A man tending a family grave is suspected of sparking one of the fires. Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korean police, along with the National Forensic Service and firefighting authorities, have launched their first joint investigation into the country's worst ever wildfire. Police in Gyeongsangbuk-do province on Monday morning using drones began conducting on-site inspections in Useong-gun County, the ignition site of the wildfire in the province, to determine what caused it and the direction in which the fire spread. The fires in Gyeongsangbuk-do province saw about 480 square kilometers of woodland affected, equivalent to 80% of the size of Seoul, and left 26 people dead. The police plan to examine traces of flames left on the trees around the tomb and the surrounding areas to determine the direction that the fire spread, and search the area around the site of the ignition to find any evidence of materials that may have caused the fire. Analysis of the evidence found from the on-site inspections is expected to take at least 3 weeks. The police revealed on Sunday that they booked a 56-year-old man on Friday without detention on charges of starting the fire on March 22nd while tending to the grave of his grandparents. The man denies the charges. On Saturday, the police found a lighter that was found at the scene and has requested analysis from the National Forensic Service for fingerprints or DNA evidence. With the main fires in both Gyeongsangbuk-do and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces now contained, the government is also focusing on helping those affected. This includes providing temporary housing and livelihood support for those who have been displaced. More than 3,000 houses were completely burned down, and significant damage was also inflicted on 30 national heritage sites and 2,000 agricultural facilities. 이수진, Arirang News.
Rescue efforts continue in Myanmar with the 72-hour golden time period since the magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck the Southeast Asian nation last week now passed. According to AFP on Monday, rescue teams and citizens in the city of Mandalay continue to search for survivors in sweltering heat above 40 degrees Celsius. Rescue personnel are also struggling to search through rubble due to a lack of manpower and equipment. Myanmar's military government says over 2,000 are dead and more than 3,900 injured. It also announced it would observe a week-long national mourning period. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that the final death toll could surpass 10,000.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Beginning in Europe, foreign ministers from 6 European countries convened in Madrid, where they urged Russia to agree to an immediate unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine. The foreign ministers of Germany, France, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom, along with the European Union's High Representative, met in Madrid on Monday local time to address the war in Ukraine. In a joint statement, they collectively urged Russia to abandon its delaying tactics and respond to Ukraine's commitment to peace by agreeing to an unconditional full ceasefire. The statement highlighted the importance of making progress within a specific time frame, and they also considered possible new sanctions to increase pressure on Russia. The possibility of using frozen Russian sovereign assets to aid Ukraine was also discussed. The ministers said they will ensure Russia's full accountability for its war crimes. Meanwhile, in France, leader of the right-wing National Rally Party and presidential hopeful Marine Le Pen has been convicted of embezzlement and barred from running in the 2027 presidential election. Le Pen has denounced the court's decision as politically motivated and says she will appeal the ruling.
What she is doing here is she's saying, I'm going to make you ineligible straight away, and I'm doing it precisely to stop you from being able to be elected president. If that's not a political decision, I don't know what it is.
On Monday local time, a French court found Le Pen guilty of embezzling European Union funds. The court sentenced her to 4 years in prison with 2 years suspended, imposed a $108,000 US fine, and prohibited her from holding public office for 5 years. This ruling effectively disqualifies her from the 2027 presidential race. In Lithuania, 3 of the 4 U.S. soldiers missing since last week have been found dead. According to a U.S. Army announcement on Monday, the bodies of 3 soldiers and an armored vehicle were recovered from a peat bog after days of intense searching using heavy equipment. The soldiers assigned to the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team 3rd Infantry Division had been taking part in a training mission near the border with Belarus when their vehicle was reported missing. Efforts continue to locate the 4th missing soldier while the cause of the incident remains under investigation. Finally, in Japan, Tokyo's cherry blossom season has arrived earlier than usual this year, with full blossom observed over the weekend. The early arrival drew large crowds to popular hanami, or flower viewing spots, across the city on Monday. Parks and gardens throughout Tokyo are experiencing peak bloom, attracting locals and tourists to the seasonal festivities. While cherry blossoms usually reach their peak in late March to early April, the early blooming this year is attributed to warmer temperatures. The country's favorite flower reaching the peak usually signals the start of the new school and business year.
Welcome to April. We'll see a big temperature jump from a chilly morning. However, fine dust from abroad moved in overnight, making the air hazy across the central region. The capital area will see air quality in the bad range all day, while other regions could experience dust spikes throughout the day today. Meanwhile, the dry spell continues with high fire danger. Dry weather advisories are still in place across much of Korea. Please stay extra cautious about fires. And this afternoon, Seoul will get up to 17 degrees Celsius, about 3 degrees higher than yesterday. Southern provinces can expect much brighter skies in the afternoon with an expected high of 15 degrees over in Busan. Then we have some rain in the forecast for tomorrow. Showers will begin in the west and gradually spread across most regions. The amount will not be that much. Meanwhile, temperatures will stay slightly above norms throughout the weekend. However, the large day to night temperature swings will continue, so make sure to dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.
저희가 매일매일 자동차를 타고 일상생활에서도 쉽게 사용을 하는데 그런 자동차에서 타이어는 계속해서 버려지고 있거든요. 전 세계적으로 10억 개 이상 버려지고 있는데 특히 소각 처리될 경우에는 대기오염 물질들이 여러 가지가 나오게 되고 매립됐을 때는 지하수나 토양오염 물질들이 많이 방출되게 됩니다. 저희는 그런 타이어들을 어떻게 잘 처리할지 좀 고민을 했었습니다. 타이어가 가지고 있는 접지력이나 내마모성이 좀 우수하다고 생각을 했고요. 저희는 타이어 하나로 신발을 3.5켤레 정도를 만들 수가 있어요. 그렇게 됐을 때 저희의 신발 한 켤레는 타이어에서 발생되는 탄소를 8.9kg 정도 저감할 수 있는 그런 효과가 있습니다. 이 일을 시작하기 전에는 타이어가 그렇게 많이 버려지는지도 몰랐고 그리고 버려진 타이어들이 환경 파괴적으로 처분되는 것도 사실은 잘은 몰랐어요. 점점 더 적체가 되고 있거든요, 타이어들이. 시간이 지나면 지날수록 더 큰 문제가 될 것 같다는 생각에 지금 일을 하고 있습니다. 타이어마다 모양이나 패턴이 굉장히 많이 다양한데 내가 가지고 있는 신발이 다른 신발들과 모양이 다를 수 있다는 점, 그런 점도 제 재미 요소로 좀 다가가고 있습니다. 저희도 그런 계기를 보다 많은 분들께 하나 더 제공해 주고자 매일매일 신는 신발을 만들겠다고 한 것도 있어요. 조금 더 주변을 살펴보면은 나 스스로도 조금 더 환경 보호에 참여할 수 있는 일이나 물건들이 더 있지 않을까, 그렇게 찾아보시면 어떨까 싶습니다. 나는 다시 달릴 수 있게 만드는 그리너입니다.
The single letter that has captivated the world. K. We answer answer that question with a K-culture journalist on The Culture Wave. What's the next K on your radar? Get ready to ride the wave of K-culture's latest trends.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Tuesday, April 1st here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and great to have you with us on News Generation. Joining us this Tuesday is Kwon Ji-yeon.
Lovely to see you this morning.
Lovely to see you this morning. And Kang Myung-ju.
Thanks for having me today.
Happy Tuesday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So we're going to begin our show with our keyword news. Our keyword for this Tuesday is press conference. Korean actor Kim Soo-hyun held a press conference yesterday that's drawing major attention, not just for what he said, but what it could mean moving forward. Now, this comes after weeks of controversy sparked by a video from the YouTube channel Hover Lab, which claimed, citing alleged statements from the late actress Kim Se-ron's family members, that Kim Soo-hyun had dated her while she was still a minor. Kim firmly denied the claim once again, saying the two were in a relationship for about a year after Kim Se-ron had become a legal adult. He also addressed another serious allegation that he was somehow responsible for Kim Se-ron's death. According to Hover Lab, the actor's family-run management company had pressured Kim Se-ron to repay a debt of 700 million Korean won, roughly $520,000 that the company had initially covered as compensation for damages related to her having an accident while driving under the influence. Kim's family has said that the sudden delivery of a formal certified document from the court demanding repayment pushed her to an emotional breaking point. Kim Soo-hyun also claimed that these narratives were fabricated, even releasing KakaoTalk messages and phone call recordings during the press conference to support his side of the story. So this press conference itself sparked even more questions than answers after it took place on Monday. The story is once again still unfolding, and the public reaction, as you can see, is intense. So I want to ask your panelists, what's your take on Monday's press conference?
Yeah, Kim Soo-hyun's press conference yesterday was deeply emotional, with Kim Soo-hyun sobbing from start to the end. Accompanied by his lawyer, it seemed he was determined to rectify some misunderstandings that has been hovering around the public these days. And he didn't really have a genuine opportunity to talk about his own position, so I think he used this opportunity to do so. And having heard of his own side of the story, I think it's time for us to remain patient. While we cannot predict when and how will this incident be come to a resolution, I believe that the truth will eventually come to light.
Right. We should definitely remain patient for the truth because the two sides are telling very different stories. And once again, we don't know what is the truth yet. I also want to ask you, what's your take on the press conference happened?
Well, I couldn't agree more what Moonju just shared with us right now. Well, yesterday's press conference was very serious and emotional. In moments like this, we should stay calm and wait for the facts to come out. We must also take time to listen to the voice of the late celebrities, families' opinion as well. And also spreading rumors can hurt everybody involved in this case.
Right.
And, you know, no one deserved to be treated like it, to be threatened or pressured online or offline as well. Let's be respectful, kind and patient with one another. Everyone deserves, you know, space to speak and be heard with respect as well.
Definitely. Now, meanwhile, Kim Soo-yeon's lawyer announced yesterday that they filed a civil lawsuit with the Seoul Central District Court seeking damages totaling 12 billion Korean won, which is nearly $9 million, against Kim Se-ron's relatives and the operator of the Hover Lab YouTube channel. So we'll see how that unfolds as well. And that was our keyword news for this Tuesday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Tuesdays are when we take a closer look at Korea's cultural scene. And today, specifically, we're going to focus on the entertainment industry. Take a look at the screen to find out more.
At first glance, life in the spotlight may look dazzling. Glamorous red carpets, adoring fans, and global fame. But behind the curtain, some celebrities may be carrying emotional burdens that remain hidden from public view. Today on NewsGen, we'll be shining a light on the mental health struggles some stars face and why that spotlight can sometimes feel more like a pressure cooker than a privilege.
So we chose this topic today because sadly, we've been hearing some heartbreaking news from the entertainment industry in Korea this year, which we briefly mentioned earlier in our keyword news. So Jiyeon, could you please walk us through the recent developments?
Okay, of course. Well, there have been a number of heartbreaking, tragic stories from the entertainment industry. Recently, in December last year, actor Lee Sung-kyun took his own life, a very sad loss. And in February this year, actress Kim Se-ron took her own life. And in March, news of singer Hui-sung's death followed. Though the cause has not yet been confirmed, South Korea continues to have the highest suicide rate among OECD countries, which is a deeply worrying statistics. It's incredibly sad that for some, suicide is increasingly seen not as a tragedy, but almost as an acceptable way out, as a solution. This highlights a growing need for open conversations around mental health and better support systems for those who are struggling right now.
Right. So as Jiyeon mentioned, actors Lee Sung-kyun and Kim Se-ron, they took their own lives. But the cause of singer Hui-sung's death, once again, hasn't been officially confirmed. Police say there were no signs of foul play, but that doesn't equate to suicide. So we'll bring you the latest once there are confirmations. But many speculate it may have been suicide, similar to the tragic case of actress Kim Se-ron and also actor Lee Sung-kyun. Now, over the years, South Korea has seen several public figures take their own lives, which is an issue that's gained international attention as a long-standing and deeply rooted concern in the Korea's entertainment industry. So what's driving these individuals who seem to have everything to such devastating decisions is what we're going to talk about today. First of all, we asked the same question to our viewers through a poll on our Arirang News YouTube channel. And there were 4 options. 1, cyber wreckers, which are YouTube channels that spread harmful rumors. 2nd, unrealistically high moral expectations placed on celebrities. 3rd, invasion of privacy and harsh, unfiltered criticism from the public. If we look at the results, 45% chose high moral expectations, followed by intense public criticism, cyber wreckers, spreading false rumors, and invasion of privacy. And we're also going to take a look at 3 comments. Our first comment for today is share THIN. It's difficult to pick one as those options usually go hand in hand with each other. I really want to know more about how the public and media can be stopped from using digital platforms to destroy another's reputation and image. For Anna says basically holding celebrities to an unreal standard of perfection and then a massive wave of public criticism when they fail. TrollUp229 to end the variable 9 says invasion of privacy and intense public criticism, high moral expectations are kind of unique to East Asia. So we're going to now break down the results of our polls and the 4 options as well. Of course, the death of a certain celebrity is deeply personal, and we can't assume just one factor is to blame for the death. But once again, we're going to take the time to unpack the 4 potential factors mentioned in our poll just before and explore how they might impact someone under constant public scrutiny. So Jian, why don't you start us off?
Well, of course, being in a spotlight is not an absolutely easy job. As you can see, celebrities face constant pressure to be perfect, all while under intense public scrutiny sometimes. And behind the scenes, many feel worn out and vulnerable to online abuse. On platforms like YouTube, as you mentioned, so-called cyber wreckers dig into people's past and turn pain into profit. They make some profit-making contents in their channel, all without any real accountability. As we have seen in the survey, 40% of viewers saw this kind of online behavior as a key factor driving them to the, suicide. And I have experienced this myself. At one point, false rumors about me were spreading rapidly online, even though it was not true. And even a senior staff at Arirang asked me if they were true, but it wasn't. And I received a flood of malicious comments, personal attacks, and even threatening DMs, including insults about my family. A well-known YouTuber later clarified that it wasn't me, and the situation eventually died down. That was my thought, but even now, some people still believe it was true, and others never really let go of that rumor in their life. Well, but for that 1 week or two, it was kind of a real nightmare for me. It was a very sad, isolating, exhausting, and deeply painful as well. I wouldn't wish that kind of pressure on anyone in the future. It may seem harmless to someone, but for those who are targeted, the damage can be devastating. Tragic, and maybe it's time we thought more about the people behind the scenes and behind the headlines.
I mean, listening to your experience, it feels really painful.
That was painful
and
indeed.
I think that once news spread, whether it's true or not, there will be people who will continue to believe that that's true.
That's right.
Which is bringing more pain to the people who are under the public spotlight.
Still making rumors.
What about you, Moon-ju?
Sometimes the public holds celebrities to excessively high ethical standards, so showering them with criticism and even some hatred. So while some celebrities have indeed made mistakes that deserves public's reprimands, but even though they have been punished or they have been charged with their what they have been made by the law, there are still many people who are targeting them with the malicious comments or hatreds. One expert even described this kind of relentless blame as a form of psychological life imprisonment. So although comment sections on entertainment news in South Korea are restricted since October 2019, led by Daum, one of the 2 major online news platforms in South Korea, then followed by Naver on the March of the following year. Still on the online digital
social media,
digital spaces, YouTube, they have remained unchecked, right? So at the same time, the more attention celebrities get, the harsher the criticism and the backlash they receive. So these days, direct attacks on celebrities through social media have increased, naturally amplifying the psychological distress. So these days, these kind of direct attacks on celebrities through social media have too much increasing moments. And of course, as public figures, celebrities do carry a social responsibility to a certain degree. I can say slightly higher, but still they have to, public has to have to give some free spaces for them.
Because they're human as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody is perfect.
Yeah. And lastly, it is also true that we should deeply think about whether they believe that they must endure any and all judgments simply because they are famous is fundamentally right.
And I think that I really agree to your point, because I feel that some people, they want celebrities to be flawless, but once again, nobody is perfect. And once they do something wrong or once they receive public backlash or criticism, it kind of follows as a label as they carry on their lives.
Yeah.
And another a problem that's been really chronic and been painful for these celebrities is the lack of privacy in their lives, right, Jian?
That's right. Well, for media, it's their job to report about celebrities, news. But for a long time, there's been this unspoken belief that if someone is in the public eye, they should simply accept a loss of their privacy. That their personal life is part of the price they pay for fame. That's according to some people's opinions, but that's not true. Being a public figure should never mean giving up their rights, their privacy to be treated. They should be treated with basic respect and dignity.
Right, because you don't have the obligation to expose everything in your personal life, right? I see. So what we're seeing is that it's not always those closest to celebrities who hurt them. It's often anonymous strangers online who leave malicious comments or cyber record channels. So I also want to ask you, Bunju, is there a growing movement in Korea calling for a change, especially in the online culture, because we've seen a lot of celebrities in immense pain because of this malicious online culture?
Yeah, fortunately, there is awarenesses around the harm of malicious comments, and consumption of gossip-driven content is growing. Over 50,000 people have consented to a petition to the Blue House calling for restrictions on cyber records. Also, additionally, many are urging media to adopt more responsible reporting practices when it comes to celebrities' private lives. And the shift highlights a collective call for accountability in digital spaces.
So fortunately, there are growing calls to protect figures who are under the public eye. So to explore what kind of legal protection currently exists or is still needed here in the country, we'll soon be joined by a lawyer after a short break. Stay with us.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
So joining us today is Kim Ji-soo, an attorney in Korea. Welcome back to the show, Ji-soo.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you for joining us. So, Ji-soo, we first want to start off with this question. We've seen how cyber record channels and hate comments can severely affect the mental health of public figures, for example, celebrities. So what kinds of legal tools does Korea currently have in place to address this, and do you think they're being enforced effectively?
So South Korea does have several laws in place. For example, under the Information and Communication Network Act, which is also called 정보통신망법, someone who spreads false or damaging information online can face up to 7 years in prison or fines of up to 50 million won. And if threats involve blackmails, the Criminal Act applies, and any money earned from those criminals can be confiscated. So on paper, the laws are quite tight. However, while the laws exist, they're not always working in practice. Online attacks cause damage instantly, but our current laws aren't quick enough to respond. And even when offenders are caught, the punishment often doesn't match the harm they've done. So offenders can just drag out the process and just hope for settle with small fines and end up getting lightened sentences. So take the YouTuber Koo Jae-hyuk case, for example. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison in 2025 for blackmailing other creators. However, that only came after years of damages. So yes, the law exists, but the reality is, unless we raise the level of enforcement and truly go beyond these crimes, the system won't be enough to stop them.
I see. Well, Ji-soo, looking beyond Korea, are there any countries with stronger laws or systems when it comes to curbing online abuse and spreading rumors?
So when we look abroad, there are some clear examples of stronger systems. For example, in the EU, there is this act called the Digital Service Act, which holds platforms like YouTube and Facebook directly accountable. They undergo annual audits, and if they don't comply, they face fines up to 6% of their whole global turnover, which is quite a lot. And China is also regulating content very aggressively these days. In 2023, they introduced laws banning online violence aimed at generating traffic, including rumors and personal attacks. So platforms that don't act can be heavily penalized, and repeat offenders can get even permanent bans on the platform itself. So these countries focus more on holding platforms accountable, while in Korea, the government plays a more direct and subtle role.
Yeah, so our last question for you today is, in your opinion, what new measures could better protect celebrities and others who are frequently in the public eye?
So I think one of the biggest steps forward is shifting more responsibility to the platforms themselves. Right now, most of the process is government-led, which is very slow, and the burden falls down to the victims, to themselves. So platforms like YouTube or TikTok are where this content spreads the fastest, so they should be the ones responding the fastest and removing harmful contents quickly and being held accountable if they don't. But I also want to emphasize the fact that the legal action isn't enough, because many celebrities don't take action because the whole process is just too overwhelming. So we need to support them better with a faster reporting tools or even legal aid to guide them through it. So I would like to end that it's not just about stronger laws, it's about creating a system that has a faster and easier to use, and especially for those in the public eye.
Definitely. All right, Kim Ji-soo, an attorney in Korea, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
So ending off, as people working in the media world ourselves, we can somehow imagine some of the pressure that comes with being a spotlight, which we discussed today. So to help prevent future tragedies, what do you believe needs to be changed, whether it's concerning the industry, the media, or a society as a whole?
Well, I would like to introduce an expert who talks about the cause of suicides. Well, this is socialist Emil Durkheim. He argued that suicide is often driven by social forces, not just personal struggles. Suicide is driven by social elements, not by personal choice or their personal problems. And as societies become more advanced, social bonds weaken, raising the risk of suicide. That's according to the socialist. And given that South Korea continues to have the highest suicide rate among OECD nations, as I mentioned before, it may well be time for some collective reaction this time for our society. In the media world, we must take responsibility for the emotional health of public figures. The public figures could include some celebrities, and malicious comments and cyberbullying cannot be normalized. And we need stronger digital protection, as Munju mentioned earlier, and real accountability, and also a cultural empathy. And I would like to emphasize on the education for younger students now as well. Before you type, ask yourself, would I say this to your family, to your friends,
to our loved ones?
That's right. If not, maybe don't say it at all.
So education for a better online culture.
Correct.
And I think that Ji-soo also mentioned some great solutions, which is one, shifting more responsibility to the platforms as well.
Yes, I do agree.
And what's your take on this, Munju?
Yeah, I completely agree with shifting the responsibility. But also, malicious comments are not just simple criticisms. And in fact, I believe they show clear differences from having constructive negative feedbacks. So those comments can pose a serious threat to someone's life, and it's crucial that we remember this fact. Malicious comments often cross the line and become overly hostile and agitated, and which is one of the key reasons we've sadly witnessed some tragedies these days and in the past where celebrities have taken their own lives. Moreover, venting negative emotions doesn't only harm the overall health of the society, but it also devastates the emotional well-being of the one typing those kind of malicious comments. So I believe for their own sake, such behavior should be put to the end.
So all for a more mature online culture as well as more protection measures. And that's all we have for today, but we will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Kwon Ju-yeon.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And Kang Mun-ju.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for staying with us, and please join us tomorrow as well. We are News Generation.
News Generation. We explore the culture, issues, and social phenomena that are led and followed by the young generation. From a detailed analysis of social media and media trends to comparisons of current affairs in Korea and abroad.
So it would be nice to see a little bit more of that as well.
See the rapidly changing world from the MZ perspective. The Culture Wave. From the hottest showbiz industry to culture and lifestyle, we deliver the latest information on all things Korean in a magazine format. With panelists and guests from diverse fields, we spotlight the global impact and appeal of Hallyu.